All right, welcome to Halitics Thursday. So glad to have you with me. And you can see you could see from the promotion we're going to talk about, continue to talk about the climate crisis and also why you really have to vote for Dr. West. You just do. I mean, I don't know, I say it in every possible way. If you disagree, please let me know why I'm wrong. 240-363-7190. The whole point of this program is we have that discussion. It's the discourse. It's back and forth. And I'm looking forward to having Arlen on in a couple of weeks because he and I don't agree on this. And he is as certain that he's correct as I am certain that I'm correct. Hopefully, possibly, we'll come to some kind of an agreement. Maybe the data, the evidence that I present today will help him see things more the way I do, but I don't know that, and I'm kind of doubtful. One of the, this is what I try to do, right? This is how I'm trying to make things a little bit better is this live stream. I've been heartened by slow but steady growth in the number of subscribers. Just got another one. So even one at a time trickling in. We're well over the 100 mark. So that was one milestone. The goal is to blow up at some point, and I'm hoping by the end of this calendar year, we'll be at 1,000. That is my target number. So I got a long way to go, but it's without question. You see other streams, people with 50, 60 vids are able to get to that 1,000 mark, that coveted number. I think at that point, you'll maybe not be as happy because you'll start seeing some breaks in my longer streams, but that's just the way it goes. But it's and I'm really not all about even getting revenue. That kind of to me would signify success. It would signify a certain level of penetration in the market that I want to reach. But it's not for me about the money. It's really about just getting to a place where I'm making a difference, that what I have to say becomes part of the discourse, the way other hosts that I do refer to, like Brianna Joy Gray, like Jimmy Dore, how they're part of the conversation, I believe. And when I saw this, you can see it, I just put that there, my notification. Your reel was popular this past week and reached 186 plays. Try creating more like it. I was thinking, well, what is that? This is Facebook. Most of my political discourse, or Halitics, my Halitical discourse, is on YouTube. So I was thinking, did I link to something that I had placed on YouTube? Because I really focus on the YouTube growth. Of course, I'm on Facebook as well. So I was like, well, what is that reel that was popular? I definitely want to do more like it. Was it the one I did about voting for Dr. West, which has done well, even though there were some technical challenges that I faced and did not fully overcome. I was just trying to figure it out. What is it? So finally, I just couldn't remember. So I went to the Facebook page and I clicked on the link, and here's what it was. Very exciting that this is the video that I've done that really seems to excite so many of you, 186 of you, right? I mean, it's very exciting for me. So here we go. So that's it. That's my video of a crow. Crow in a tree cawing. You could just hear it. Yeah, you can hear the crow cawing. There it is again. So that really did it. That's what's causing me to blow up. 286 hits in 1 week. And for me, I guess that's pretty darn good. So maybe I just need to do more. And I told you, I like to do the animal stuff. I like to talk about the orcas. And I mean, it's sad. It's a horrible tragedy, what we're doing to those orcas, what humans are doing to the orcas, and of course the penguins all dying out as well, especially the emperors, because when the ice melts underneath them as they're nesting, the chicks die. And obviously once if there's no more chicks, then pretty soon the colony goes. So I guess you want more animal videos. That's the best I can do. That was a pretty lame video, but I did at the beginning, I have to say, I got a nice shot of that crow. And let me see if I can close up one more time before we move on to kind of, I guess, a little more seriousness. But, hey, crows are a serious business. And crows, one of the corvid family, the most brilliant of all birds. Apparently, they are as smart as only a handful of other animals. The chimps, the great apes are very, very bright. Obviously, humans. Let's see. There you go. There's that crow in the tree. That's pretty good. Not bad with my trusty Google Pixel. So and you could hear the crow, so that wasn't bad. Let's just go for it one more time, a little bit bigger visual. Yeah, so the crows are there at the top, along with some of those magnificent cetaceans, the orcas, the dolphins, the apes. So, and crows can talk. They talk amongst themselves. They do have funerals. They can also actually, like parrots, parrot what humans say. Now, I understand from the back in Monterey days, my listener there, Bird had a bird, but that's not who I'm thinking of. It was the gentleman who lived he was a wood carver, and now I can't remember his name. If you're listening, wood carver, give me a call. And I'm very, very sorry. He made a beautiful little stash and a little bowl for me, a little wooden stash box. But it wasn't a box. It was a little tube with a screw on it. It was beautiful work. Very, very talented. Lived in Carmel, and he loved animals. He always was talked about the scrub jay. The scrub jay was so much smarter than the crow. I haven't been able to verify that. We have blue jays here, not scrub jays in the east. But he ultimately became a habanero herb. He ultimately became a global warming denier, which was much, much, much to my disappointment, much to my sadness. And I always wondered whether I had done something wrong that I couldn't persuade him that we absolutely need. Obviously, we need to address the climate catastrophe. And things have only gotten worse. And yet, despite all of that, despite how terrible things are, there's so many of you who really still aren't accepting the fact, the indisputed fact of the climate cataclysm. And for me, that is, I see that as nothing short of a massive failure on my part, that I have been unable to persuade folks that we've got to do something about this, and right now. Here is my crow video one more time, since it's so popular on Facebook. And by the way, friend me on Facebook, and also even better than friending me, you'll get all the same content and in a more dynamic, more conversational format if you join the Halitics group. The Halitics group. All right, here's your crow one more time. Come on, crow. All right, so there it is, and very nice indeed. All right, let's get to the actual program itself in terms of more topics. Oh, no, one more thing. I always promise folks I'll do this. If you comment, I don't always do this, I generally do. If you comment on my live stream on YouTube, then I am going to call you out. I'm going to respond to you. So here's a comment on the live stream. And I forget who wrote this. Now, I forgot. I should have written down who it was. I forgot to do that, but I guess it doesn't really matter. So this is alluding to my program yesterday. I mentioned I was heading to the Jersey Shore. Which beach, Hal, and how are you going to get there? So it's called Cape May Courthouse is the community. It's near Cape May. It's not Cape May, near Stone Harbor, in case you're wondering. And if you're in that vicinity and you see me on the beach and you know what I look like, come over and say hello. And then how are you going to get there? Hope it doesn't involve the use of fossil fuels. I mentioned we do transport ourselves when we do buy personal vehicle by Tesla, and that's all electronic, all battery powered. So that is how we get there. It is not, tragically, not fossil fuel free. It is gasoline free. It is not fossil fuel free. We have to power it with electricity. And when you charge, certainly at the Tesla charging stations on the highway, then they are using whatever the grid powers, just like at home we use the grid. And we do have some renewables in our grid, but we also have probably a significant preponderance of the electricity coming from fossil fuels, and I assume natural gas. We do have, unfortunately, coal-powered plants here still in Maryland as well. So no, it's not perfect, but it is better. It's less bad than the alternative. But yes, the ultimate is we have to start generating electricity solely with solar, wind, thermal, hydro, etc. Hamsters in a wheel, maybe. Anything but burning fossil fuels. The nice thing about the Tesla, beyond the fact that you require far less fossil fuels, even if the electricity that powers the car is generated from fossil fuels, it still goes more than twice as far as even a hybrid like my old car, which was the Prius, which got 50 miles per gallon. The Tesla gets an equivalent of well over 100 miles for a gallon on the amount of electricity that you would be able to generate from a gallon of fuel. So it is definitely more efficient. So that's good, not good enough. But the positive is ultimately, if we do go to an all-electric, all clean, green energy grid, the Tesla would in fact be a green form of transportation. It would not create any additional fossil fuels from driving it. All right, so the response was, I like Dr. West, but I chuckle when he mentions the will of the people. Everybody claims to represent the will of the people. I personally find, let me see, what does he say? I personally have a simple qualitative metric. I look at Home Depot. If there's a lot of people in the Home Depot parking lot, the economy is doing well. If I see elbow-to-elbow traffic in the airports with full and overflowing flights, I don't know how to curb the public's appetite for travel. And how do we convince people to sweat in the summer and freeze in the winter? Okay, so things like air conditioning and heat can be generated with clean green energy. We don't have to use fossil fuels. The way we get there, and I've talked about this many times, is obviously by making the fossil fuels relatively much more expensive for anyone who uses them either in business or personally. And you do that with a tax. And once you do that, then for example, the utilities will immediately begin a very quick transition. They can do it quickly if they have to, if it means profits, very quick transition to clean green energy. Again, because this will hurt poor, struggling working people, any sales tax is always regressive unless it's on true luxury items like yachts. But on any kind of a commodity item like fuel, yes, a sales tax is regressive. It should be on the sales because, after all, whoever buys the fuel is the one who's burning it, causing the problem. But if we return the money one-to-one to everybody who is within the taxing region, right? If we tax all fossil fuels in the United States, every American should be, every individual should get a rebate, or at least every individual whose income is below a certain level should get an equal and equivalent rebate, so you get no benefit from consuming more fuel. You actually pay the tax when you purchase it, but you get the money back. If we did that, it would become a progressive tax because the rich consume far more fossil fuels than the poor do, A, and B, because corporations would be taxed. It's not like they get a freebie, but I wouldn't return the money to the corporation, so they'd have to pay the higher tax, which would motivate them very quickly to move to clean green energy. But since they're paying the tax and they're not taking money back, there would be more in the pool to return to poor, struggling, and working people. All right, so that's the response to that text or comment on Facebook, and YouTube. And if you want to address what I just said, the best way to do it, call me, 240-363-7190 when I'm live. And if you don't want to do that, go ahead and comment as my viewer there did. And let's see. Okay, yeah, as my viewer there did. All right, let's go to the second part. The commenter noted kind of a response or reply to what I was saying about how the orcas are starving. That was a story I talked about yesterday. And linked to it. So I went to that exact site. I wanted to see what was the dispute about, are the orcas starving? And so from the Puget Sound Institute, scientists say it's not that simple. All right, so maybe I was too definitive in stating the orcas are starving. I do note that this article is just about 4 years old, so we have 4 more years of data, and the general consensus has continued to be, yes, they are starving, or they're certainly not getting sufficient energy. Now, maybe that doesn't mean they're starving. I don't know how else to describe it, but you can see that resident killer trying to get a Chinook, and I don't think there's any doubt that whale's going to get that salmon in very short order. I would not want to be that salmon. Some of the arguments that the whales may not be starving, I want to go through them because I think they're pretty easily responded to. But here first, let me get that. I hate when I do that. I should have definitely put myself first before sharing it, so we wouldn't get that half cut up. But are the orcas starving? It's not a settled question, says. And by the way, I will certainly always defer to no wildlife biologists like Brad Hansen at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center. I'll always defer. So if he says it's not settled, then my inclination is to believe it's not settled. But again, there's a dispute. So it isn't settled, but that just because it's not settled doesn't mean, in fact, the orcas aren't starving the southern residents. Now remember, the southern residents is a subspecies of orcas. They are not migratory whales like some are. They're residents of the Puget Sound and the region just outside the Puget Sound. And there's a dispute, or at least there was in 2019. I don't know if there still is. So what Hansen says is that it's not just the lack of sufficient energy, food energy, that's causing the die-off. And what, the die-off means that older orcas are dying. Some are dying from other causes than starvation. Maybe it's old age. Maybe it's pollution, noise. Now, according to Hansen, the southern residents, and you say, well, how come they're called the southern residents if they live in the north? Because, right, isn't the Puget Sound pretty far north? It's near the Canadian border, and I believe it touches on the Canadian border because Vancouver Island is in the Puget Sound, and that's Canada. So that sounds north. But they're southern residents because there's northern residents are in Alaska, waters of Alaska, outside Alaska. So they are facing a lot of problems. One is low, insufficient energy, food energy, low salmon runs. You can see that I highlighted. Noise and pollution. They're all killing. It's not just a lack of food. It's other factors as well. So the NOAA guy says, look, they are seeing a decline in their pretty much their sole food source. They are a subspecies that has evolved to eat the Chinook salmon because there have been so many. There were just so many. They didn't have to eat anything else. There's this big, fat, tasty pink meat fish that they could eat, and they could eat it all the time. So why bother with anything else, why go out for Chinese when you can eat Pacific salmon? You don't need to migrate across the Pacific to eat fish on the other side when you can eat right here. That's what the orcas said. That's what that subspecies evolved to eat. So what Hansen says is it's a stress. Yes, it's a problem, but it's not the only problem. So it's not necessarily the direct cause. So I'm going to stick with I got to tell you what, folks, I'm going to kind of stick with starve because it sounds like that lack of sufficient food is a major factor. Even if it's not the only factor, it's a big, big problem for these orcas. So I don't know how else to really view it. You want to say, well, they're not starving because they're dying from the noise is stressing them out, so they're dying of heart failure because of the lack of all the stress. Okay, but it's partly due. It's always behind that problem also is the lack of food. And I don't think we can just pretend it's not, we can just say, well, it's not. I mean, it's kind of, isn't it really just who cares? The orcas are dying. Lack of food is a big problem. Is it the sole cause? Are they actually washing up emaciated. Some are, apparently, not all. But it's clearly a huge part of the problem. So I'm going to stick, I have no problem with sticking with, starvation. And I'll just get you a little more on this, but I get what the writer, the commenter is saying, and it's fair. It's not just a lack of food. It's part of it. It's not all of it. But there's a response in that. This is the article that was cited to me, by the way. So I'm just going with the article that the viewer cited. According to a biology professor, the UW bio professor, Sam Wasser, there's no question that the orcas are suffering due to a lack of salmon. There's an enormous amount of evidence. And he published a paper which highlighted the connection between a lack of food. By the way, I talked about this yesterday. The female orcas not getting pregnant or aborted pregnancies because there's just not enough energy for them and their fetuses. So it's really a horrible situation, and maybe it isn't. Maybe it's too simple to say it's just starvation. There isn't a famine exactly. There's just less food. And it's really, really, really effing bad. I'm going to tie all of this again to Dr. West, as I did yesterday, the climate cataclysm, what we're doing to our environment, why we have an absolute duty to, I believe, there's a moral imperative. I'm going to say it that way. There is a moral imperative to vote for Dr. West. And a lot of people just say it's just the opposite. You have a moral imperative to vote for Biden because he is the only person who stands between us and fascism and Trump. I think basically Biden is, if he's not a true fascist, he's a neo-fascist, whether his support for, he was one of the architects of the Omnibus 94 crime bill that led to another 800,000 Americans being incarcerated. We have by far the highest incarceration rate in the world. His policies have led to more and more corporate stranglehold on America. The student debt crisis can be laid to a significant degree at his door. Look that one up if you don't believe me. The wars, endless war, can be, he was one of the people in the Senate in 2002, 2003 who cheerled for and rallied support for the absolutely disastrous war on the people of Iraq, for disastrous for them, disastrous for the Middle East, led directly to an even more cruel, even more deadly world, and one where the fossil fuel industry has an even greater stranglehold than it might otherwise have. So, I'm not going to accept that voting for one duopolist over the other is essential. I think it's wrong. It's not, and it will not get us to where we need to be. And we'll get into that in greater specificity. But let's just talk about what we're going through. My promo for today. It keeps getting worse. So this is a video from yesterday, France 24. I kind of like their videos sometimes. From yesterday, and it's interesting because they kind of get because they're French, their English, and this is a France 24 video for the United States. I don't know whether that's their headline, but the grammar's a little off. Hot tub, unprecedented temperatures. So that's the Atlantic Ocean. The temperatures are unprecedented. I think you would use the past participle there. Here's the video.
The Florida Keys are known for their warm waters, but now they're reaching hot tub-like conditions. A water temperature buoy at Manatee Bay in the Everglades National Park registered a high of 101 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius late Monday afternoon. It's potentially the hottest ocean temperature ever recorded. It could have been considered an outlier if it weren't for the fact that other official temperature buoys nearby also topped 100 Fahrenheit. Experts have been tracking exceptionally warm water temperature readings since the start of the month, and the heat stress is starting to have devastating effects on coral in the bay, turning them white as they expel algae and slowly starve to death.
The corals are not happy with this level of hot water.
let me just stop it there. So she said expelling algae. I think we would say algae, but maybe with the English accent, and I'm assuming she's French. The narrator, maybe they say algae. I'm not really sure, but you can actually see the coral bleaching and how awful it is. I mean, this is dead. It's dead. That's a dead coral reef because of these 100-degree water temperatures. That's the water off the coast of Florida
Bay, turning them white as they expel algae and slowly starve to death.
The corals are not happy with this level of hot water. They are bleaching. A lot of them are dying, I've heard too. And these hot waters extend to great depth. I've seen some measurements of 90 degrees Fahrenheit down at the level of the reefs. And that is just unimaginable heat. And here we are only in July. I mean, we've got another couple months of peak heating to go.
The new record comes amid ongoing marine heat waves around the world. The World Meteorological Organization says this threatens ocean ecosystems and fishing.
It has been getting a little bit slower and slower each summer we've been fishing. As far as all of our bay waters, any near shore waters, everything's super, super hot.
While there aren't official ocean temperature records, a study said the previous highest temperature of 37.6 Celsius was seen in Kuwait Bay in July 2020.
All right, I want to just stop it. Okay, yeah, there we go. One more time. Let me see if I can show you that. So 3 years later, right? I mean, obviously these temperature readings for the hottest temperatures are very recent because of the anthropogenic, the human-caused climate catastrophe, the cataclysm. So obviously we're going to see recent temperatures, but just think about this. The temperatures of the ocean did not, at least the hottest temperatures, didn't rise appreciably, apparently, for 3 years because the hottest temperature was in 2020. And that was in one of the hottest places in the entire planet, right? The Kuwait Bay, which is also relatively shallow. You'd think shallow waters is where water would get hotter. This is the Atlantic Ocean, okay? And it's not tropical, it's semi-tropical. I believe Kuwait Bay, I may be wrong, is in the tropics. I can't look it up because I'm, doing my show, but that's farther south, shallow waters. Atlantic Ocean, deeper waters, further north, and now we have 38 Celsius. That's what we're doing to our planet. This is the catastrophe writ large. Population on Earth never been greater, and now the fish catches are dropping. We're seeing the salmon population decimated. Other species are starving or dying from stress related in part to insufficient food energy source. We have to do something. We have to do something. Now, is the solution for more of the same as the solution? Well, let's get the rest of the video in and then I'll get
Kuwait
there.
Bay in July 2020. On Monday, the Mediterranean Sea also reached its highest temperature on record with over 28 Celsius.
All right, so there it is. There's just, it's horrible. It's horrifying. It's awful. I get this. This is not the way for me to build noise. It would be better. I guess I could be Jimmy Dore and say, well, where do they measure those temperatures in the water? Oh, I think they weren't at the same depth. They were probably a little closer to the surface of the water. So that's why it was hotter, because instead of at 5 meters, they were measured, the thermometer was only at 2 meters. So of course it's going to be hotter. That could be the response, and then talk about a big conspiracy. I think some conspiracies, what are called conspiracy theories, some are right, are correct, are real, are true, are happy. I do absolutely think the FBI was looking for evidence to convict Trump, and was unwilling to accept the truth that he did not conspire with Russia. And I think that you want to call that conspiracy theory, fine. Sure. I think there are what people call conspiracy theories. Sometimes are true, sometimes they're not. There's no conspiracy among climatologists and barometric pressure readers who also do temperature readings to pretend that the temperatures are hotter than they really are. That's not happening. The temperatures really are hotter. And we've got to do something about it. Now, I know all my, not all of them, but many of my former progressive activists or people I've worked with in the past, some I continue to work with, are just going to keep saying, oh, you got to vote for Biden. You got to vote for the duopolist on the left because the duopolist on the right is even worse, even worse. You can't, we don't have time. I wish I had the luxury. I always hear it all the time. Wish I had the luxury to vote my conscience, but I don't, which is basically saying you have no conscience for voting for, not voting for Biden, for voting for, demanding that we vote for Cornel West. Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this article just published in The Guardian. I think it kind of makes the point. Biden must declare a climate emergency. He must do so now, Peter Kalmus. He had the last opportunity to keep the world under 1.5 Celsius, and he is squandering time we do not have. So he's not just squandering. Let me just be clear. He's not just squandering. He's making things worse. He's actively worsening the greatest threat humankind has ever. Let me say it this way. Maybe nuclear holocaust was a greater threat. And we're probably, although we're actually getting close to that too now with war with Russia, which Biden is promoting, a war with Russia with the cluster bombs and all the support for Ukraine. So this is why you can't vote for this guy. But as great a threat as the nuclear holocaust was, either it was kind of a 0 or 1, right? It either happens or it doesn't. I mean, you could have, I guess, a limited nuclear war, and we've maybe even already had those. But ultimately, if we start dropping nuclear bombs on each other, there's just massive, many, many, many millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people die. So it's a binary. It's either yes, 0 or 1, no or yes. But the climate catastrophe, the climate cataclysm is not binary. It's an ongoing event. It's already begun. Probably we saw temperatures rising as early as halfway through, if not before that, even before that, possibly the last century, halfway through the last century of the last millennium. But we're also seeing the temperatures accelerate and rise. So he's not squandering it. It's not like he's like kicking the can down the road. He's actively making things worse. And how do we know this? And you can't vote. You cannot morally. I don't believe you can morally vote for somebody who's actively making things worse unless the only alternative is somebody else who's going to actively make things even worse, much worse. So I guess that's like the defense of voting for Stalin over Hitler, maybe. And I wouldn't, by the way, condemn you if you voted for Hitler. Well, I would have trouble with that one. But, I think that's the only argument, right, is that the other person is even as so much worse. And there's no alternative. So that's, I guess, right, the best defense would be for voting for Biden. So is that fair? Is it fair? Because I know a lot of people say, well, that is true. There's no alternative. And the alternative, except for Trump, right? Well, Trump's going to almost certainly get a nomination now because DeSantis is done. So let's say, is that fair? Is it fair to say, well, Biden's bad? Maybe I don't like Biden, but he really wants to make things better. He's not as bad as Trump. And so let's find out. And my answer, nope. Biden's just as bad or almost as so close, it doesn't matter. So what's causing those burning oceans, right? The now melted ice cap. What's causing that? The food shortages, the death, the climate refugees that we're observing right now. What's causing this? Fossil fuels. And no amount of tree planting, recycling, carbon offsetting, or wishful carbon capture thinking will ever change it. That's why I have always been against look, on the margins, fine, nibble around. The only way to end the heat nightmare is to raise the cost of fossil fuels to the point where we stop buying them. That's the only way. We have to raise the price. Now, you could say, well, relatively, we only have to raise the price relative to other forms of energy. But it's not true. Because gasoline is so cheap right now, $2.50, maybe $3.50 a gallon. It's cheaper today than it was 100 years ago, or close, about the same. Only when we've seen significant hikes in the price of gasoline have people driven less. And we did see that back in California when I was out there. I think it was 2007. I may have the dates wrong. I don't remember what year it was. The price of gasoline went over $5 a gallon. People drove less. They absolutely, across the country, people drove less. They drove less gasoline cars. They transitioned. We are consuming more because the price is just too cheap. And Biden is actively making that problem worse. All right, you're listening to Halitics. Click bottom right of your screen. Subscribe, please. You disagree with me on anything, call in. If you say, hey, this is the greatest show I've ever heard, Hal, you're the best, then that's an even better reason to call in. I'd love to hear from you if that's what you're going to say, but I'll take the negativity. I'll take the blows as well. So why does Peter Kalmus say that Biden's at fault? So here, Biden's refusal to declare a climate emergency, he could do that right now. He doesn't have to wait for Congress to act. He can just say, hey, look at these temperatures, 115 degrees every friggin' day in the desert in Arizona. 100 degrees off the coast of Florida that's destroying the fishing industry, causing, hunger. We got to do something. Something's got to be done, gentlemen. And right now, I'm going to call a climate emergency. And if you don't like it, then pass some bills, legislation that'll change that. But instead, what is he doing? He's pushing new pipelines and new drilling at an even faster pace than Trump did. And you heard what Kalmus said. The only way to stop this is to keep it in the ground. And all the incentives and all the subsidies for clean, green energy ain't going to do it. It's not going to stop it. It's not going to make things better. Only if we keep it in the ground. And he ain't doing that. He's not about that. He's not about that. If you think of Joe Biden as your boy, he's not. He's the boy of the fossil fuel industry. He's their, shill, puppet. Whatever he is, he's doing their bidding. He is not on our side. He is not on the planet's side. There is somebody who is, and his name is not RFK Jr. Let me say that right now. RFK Jr. has thrown shade on the climate community, on the clean, green energy community by saying, well, we can't let the government take two new powers because that'll hurt, they'll just use those to repress people. He is causing folks to be concerned not about the crisis itself, but about how governments will respond to that potential crisis. I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned about the potential response, but what we need to do is demand a response. And he is not doing that. He doesn't get it. And it's really unfortunate because this is a guy who was an environmental lawyer. Another issue with him is if the only way we can fairly or even ultimately successfully, effectively address the climate catastrophe is if we reduce wealth and income inequality. RFK Jr. doesn't support Medicare for all. RFK Jr. doesn't support higher taxes on the wealthy. He can't say that. He supports them. He is not the right solution to this problem. Marianne Williamson, she supports endless war in Ukraine. A huge driver of today's current climate catastrophe. There's one person that we have to support. His face is on the screen. Let's hear from him right now.
The field is growing in the 2024 presidential race with former Vice President Mike Pence And North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum entering the race. The total number of Republican candidates now stands at 12. This comes as two Democrats are challenging President Biden for the White House in the Democratic primary. That's RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. And just this week, a third-party candidate jumped into the race, Dr. Cornel West, who launched his bid as a member of the People's Party. And Dr. West,
of course, now he's running as a Green. This was a little bit earlier, but
60%
let's
of
jump to
Americans of all colors who are struggling every day and month to put food on the table and are hardly doing it, while the 1% is simply tied to their quests for the luxurious life.
All right, so listen how this sort of smirk on Tapper's face, because he's the 1% writ large right there. And I'm just going to cut him right out of this. I don't really think we need to even see Jake Tapper. It's kind of, not really fair to the professor. I had somebody say to me, well, aren't you a little bit afraid that Dr. West's speaking style might alienate some people? He sort of has that preacher thing going. Some people might not like it. And my answer is, yeah, anything that might keep anyone from voting for Dr. West concerns me. It doesn't mean I don't think he's the best candidate. It doesn't mean I'm not going to vote for him. It doesn't mean I'm going to say, well, he might not be able to defeat Biden, or he might not be able to, he might help Trump defeat Biden, so I'm not going to vote for him. No, because Biden is part of the duopoly. He's part of the problem. He's causing the existential threat we all face to only get worse. My role, and what I view as the media's role, certainly if you're the progressive media, if you're on the left, and you could, you be your own media, right? You're on social media, you're on Twitter. I think what your role is to explain why this man is the best choice, why we all have to support him, why anyone else doesn't make sense. That's your job. That's your job. Your job is not to worry and fret, oh no, maybe Dr. West can't win, or he speaks kind of a little bit, different than some other candidates. So some people might not like that. Your job is to explain why that doesn't mean nothing. That who gives a fat rat's ass how he speaks. He speaks extremely intelligently and intellectually, but who cares if there's a bit of a pulpit style? What matters is the policies. What matters is a deep understanding of the fundamental injustices in society today, in America and around the world. And what matters is having solutions to those problems. And he's the candidate who does. There's a moral imperative to vote for him.
American democracy not just is at stake, the whole planet, Brother Jake. You know that, man, with fossil fuels. And look at the debt ceiling agreement. We can make a deal with Brother Manchin in terms of his pipeline that will do in not just working class people's spaces, but ecological collapse given what's going on the East Coast. But we can't make a deal with him in terms of voting rights in regard to the filibuster. That's Brother Biden. We need something better. Where's the best of the country?
Yeah.
All right, so exactly right. We need something better. And that need isn't predicated on, as important as it isn't predicated just on economic justice. It isn't predicated on just on, although it's a major part of it, it isn't predicated just on a little bit better life for the 99%. It's predicated on survival. It's predicated on this planet's survival. If this program has any value, if I'm able to make a difference, that difference will come by persuading you to vote for Dr. Cornel. To say you're going to vote for Dr. Cornel West, to forget about the Democrats as a solution to the problem, forget about the Republicans, if you ever thought about them in the first place, vote for Dr. Cornel West for president. I'll be back tomorrow. You have a great afternoon, or whatever time of day it might be at this point where you are.